The story begins in the eastern continent, where the forces of the barbarians clash with the defending soldiers of the Eldoran kingdom. In the bloody battlefield, heads go flying as the powerful barbarians gain the upper hand and tear through Eldoran forces like paper. Still, the captain of the Eldoran troop, Seraphina, refuses to give up on her comrades. She rallies her troops to continue fighting and cut a path out for retreat. Even as Seraphina cuts through some barbarian soldiers, she notes that her side has taken too many casualties to have a chance at making it out alive. Suddenly, a new monster appears from the barbarian side. Vior, a giant barbarian elite, shreds through Eldoran soldiers and lands straight in front of Seraphina with his bloody blade raised high. Vior easily spots Seraphina as the seasoned captain among the common soldiers and challenges her to a one-on-one. Knowing that no one else can stand a chance against this monster's huge blade, Seraphina agrees to the fight, hoping to buy some time for her men to escape. She jumps high up and plunges down at Vior, who parries her attack while casually standing. Then, he swings at Seraphina with his immense power and sends her flying to the side. Seraphina lands on her feet and rebounds to launch another attack at Vior, and the two of them start trading blows in a heated exchange. Although Seraphina impressively keeps up with Vior's strength, his overwhelming power still forces her back. Left with no other choice, she uses her ultimate technique that casts a magic enhancement on her sword. Using all her remaining strength, she roars and takes on Vior's final strike. Just as the two swords meet, one of the blades breaks and goes flying into the ground. The Eldoran soldiers watch, stunned, as their captain holds a broken sword in defeat. Seraphina collapses to her knees, accepting defeat, and Vior sincerely praises her for holding her own against him for so long. Seraphina then asks him to kill her as a warrior deserves, but Vior refuses to take her life. Instead, he flashes her a sinister grin and promises that he'll take her alive and put her body to good use. After this ominous warning, Seraphina loses consciousness and wakes up in a dark prison cell, wearing a dirty rag and strong shackles. Shocked, she looks around and gathers her bearings for a bit. She then finally remembers that she was defeated by the barbarians and is now their captive. Once she remembers Vior's final warning, Seraphina gets terrified, wondering what kind of torture the barbarians will inflict on her. She wonders if they'll use her as a slave, or if they'll subject her to immense pain for entertainment. In the end, the scariest thought flashes through her mind, and she wonders if Vior wants to use her body as a woman. Since Seraphina is still an unmarried young noble, the thought of a British barbarian sullying her pure body puts her in serious anxiety. Then, Seraphina also realizes that her poor comrades were still surrounded by barbarians after she got knocked out. Thinking that they all got slaughtered or taken captive just like her, she feels a crushing rush of despair. In the end, she feels the most worried for the common people of her kingdom, since without the eastern land, their crops will continue to die with no land left to plant. All of these regrets bring the experienced captain to tears, but suddenly, she hears another person's voice behind her. Seraphina looks around to see Circe, a female servant carrying some water with her. Seraphina takes a closer look at Circe and finds some pliers and tools on her belt, so she thinks that she's here to torture her for information. However, Circe doesn't mention anything about torture, and instead reveals that she's here to prepare Seraphina as the perfect trophy for King Vior. She then chains Seraphina to the wall to prevent her from moving, and the night captain braces herself for some brutal torture. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, Vior thinks about visiting Seraphina, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Back at the prison cell, Seraphina is now nude while Circe washes her body with a wet cloth. Once she finishes cleaning, Seraphina asks Circe why she's going through so much ceremony for a slave like her. Circe points out that Seraphina's body was filthy from the battle, so she was simply cleaning her up. Circe then makes a casual comment about her appearance, surprised that she's the woman who battled her master for so long. Circe explains that she was expecting Seraphina to look more muscular since she can hold her own against Vior, but instead, she's simply a feminine girl. Hearing this, Seraphina's ego gets bruised since she thinks a knight like her has no time to look girly or cute. Circe understands her emotions, but she reveals that Vior really likes how Seraphina looks. This statement leaves Seraphina even more confused, but Circe refuses to explain further. Instead, she quietly warns Seraphina that she's never leaving barbarian territory again, all while holding a sharp knife in her hand. Seraphina thinks that her end is finally near, and she desperately struggles against her restraints, hoping for a miracle. As Circe gets closer with the sharp knife and cold metal pliers, Seraphina finally gives up and closes her eyes. However, for some reason, Circe only cuts her restraints and trims her fingernails and puts a dress on Seraphina's body. As she opens her eyes, Seraphina notices the strangely decent clothes, and she realizes that her dress is scented with perfume. She wonders why on earth the barbarians would give their prisoner a scented robe, and wonders if they're preparing her for a sacrificial ritual or something. Before she can ask Circe, she hears a loud roar coming from the surface above the dungeon. Circe confirms that Vior is here, and soon, the massive barbarian king lumbers into Seraphina's prison cell. After entering the cell, Vior formally introduces himself as the son of Barbarian barbarian great chief Olden One Eye. Meanwhile, Seraphina observes his massive body and golden eyes, realizing there's no way he's a human being. She then recalls a story from her grandfather about an expedition against the barbarian soldiers. Even back then, the powerful brutes easily overwhelmed the human forces and ripped their hearts out for their rituals. Thinking she's about to face the same fate, Seraphina tells Vior that she's not afraid of anyone, and she dares him to do whatever he wants with her. Hearing this, Vior wonders what she's talking about since he has no plans of sacrificing her. He finally explains the real reason why he captured her was to take her as his bride. With just these few words, Seraphina's world turns upside down, and all the anxiety in her mind rushes to her face in the form of a beet red blush. At first, she's too shocked to fully understand what's happening, so she asks Vior if this is a prank. When Vior explains he truly wants to marry her, Seraphina completely loses her mind. She asks him why he'd marry an enemy, so Vior explains that his barbarian race has no problems with loving their enemies. Then, he goes into a state of fiery passion as he recalls the traditions of his proud ancestors. Ever since the dawn of the barbarian race, their strongest kings would always marry a female knight to honor their passion for the sword. Despite this explanation, Seraphina still refuses to become his wife. The sneaky barbarian reminds her that she told him to do whatever he wanted with her, so Seraphina is left trapped by her own words. Then, Vior also explains that he's not just marrying her for the sake of a cultural tradition. He recalls their fight on the battlefield, where he felt the sincerity of Seraphina's passion for her sword. Facing such a powerful woman, he immediately fell in love with her and decided he'd marry her no matter what. After hearing Vior's sincere confession, Seraphina is too flustered to respond, so he turns around to leave the room. Before leaving, Vior promises that he won't force her to marry against her will, so she can carefully consider her decision. After he finally leaves the cell, the shell-shocked knight wonders what's going to happen to her in this crazy dungeon. While waiting for her marriage, Seraphina recalls a memory from 7 years ago. Back then, her brother Sidious notified Seraphina that she was named as the captain of an expedition to the barbarian lands. Seraphina agreed and started leaving to attend her duties, but Sidious stopped her to hand over an invitation to a noble banquet. She was confused and wondered what her brother wanted, so Sidious reminded her that she was still a noble lady with a reputation to uphold. Seeing her brother's intense stare, Seraphina stood straight and immediately accepted the invitation. Later, she dressed up in pretty clothes and arrived at Countess Ildhol's mansion for the banquet. Seeing Seraphina dressed up in normal clothes, the nobles around her started making comments about her profession. In hushed whispers, all of the venomous elites made horrible remarks about Seraphina's appearance, wondering if a delicate lady like her would ever be worthy of leading seasoned warriors in battle. Even though they all knew her real strength, the nobles thought it was a waste for a woman to be as strong as her. Seraphina felt overwhelmed by all the negative comments, so she went to a balcony for some fresh air. Then, a few young ladies went out and asked her to join them instead of sulking alone. As the four of them sat together, the young ladies asked Seraphina if she was scared of her dreadful job. Hearing stories of monsters and dragons, the ladies wondered if Seraphina would be okay in such dangerous situations. Sera smiled and explained that dragons were just imaginary creatures, but the ladies reminded her that she's still going to face the barbarians. Knowing the tales of the brutal barbarians and their horrible treatment of female knights, the ladies tell Sera to stay at home to avoid a brutal end. However, she slams her hands on the table to silence them all. Sera confidently declares that their kingdom has been trying since day one to conquer the eastern lands. In her mind, only by conquering the east could their kingdom gain enough resources to feed their people, so she was ready to fight against the barbarians. Still, the young ladies reminded Seraphina that even the prestigious princess Wisterisha, who was her role model, went missing after she faced the barbarians. All of the ladies advised her to remain home and marry a suitable husband, but Sera grew tired of their negative attitude and left the gathering. Afterward, as she headed back home on her carriage, she felt disgusted by the nobles who dined on luxurious meals while their common people starved on the streets. On her way back, she encountered a poor man being attacked by 3 guys. The boys themselves were starving peasants, forced to rob others for the sake of their survival. Still, Sera jumped in to protect the poor man and warned the robbers to back off. With no way out, the boys tried attacking her with their farming tools, but Sera easily defeated them. The boys wondered if their lives were about to end, but suddenly, Sera took pity on them and gave them her precious necklace. Shocked, the boys thanked her for her precious gift and promised never to hurt another person again. After they left, Sera felt her heart clench from pain at the state of her people. Internally, she made a promise to her people that she would return victorious from the east and bring peace to their kingdom. A few days later, before leaving for the expedition, Sera paid respects to the missing princess Wisterisha. Suddenly, her brother popped up from behind, furious that she couldn't find a husband again at the banquet. Seraphina reminded Sidious that she was about to fight for their kingdom, but the proud prince firmly told her that women could never fight on the front lines. As he angrily shouted her name, suddenly, the prince's voice shifted into Vior's. Vior advanced towards her and stretched out a hand, determined to make his wife no matter what. As the Barbarian grabs her, Serafina's nightmare finally ends, and she wakes up in a cold sweat. She then hears a powerful snore coming from nearby, and she notices Vior sleeping right next to her. In an instant, the sight of Vior's powerful body brings Serafina to her senses, and she draws a cold breath, terrified of handling him as his wife. That was episode 1. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.